All right. Hello, everyone. I've got a bonus video for you for the SaaS Discovery Masterclass because I got a lot of questions. There's a couple of reasons I'm doing this bonus video. One, I got a lot of questions about how do you ask some of these questions to an outbound buyer, right? You went to them. They don't really know what you do. They certainly don't know your value prop, and you're starting to ask them, these pain questions. Sometimes that doesn't go so well. So how do you earn the right to do that? And I also have an email series on discovery tips, where in the series I mentioned that I would show you how to eliminate friction from discovery calls using a discovery prompter. And so this is going to be a very short video. This is going to be me showing you how I do discovery prompters. And so what's a discovery prompter before we get into it? It's basically a piece of content. It doesn't have to be a deck. It could be purely verbal that you use at the beginning of your discovery call to earn the right to ask questions. Okay, so you're doing a discovery prompter right and effectively if during the 3 to 5 minutes you do it, your customer or your prospect feels like you're reading a page from their diary. Okay, so you should be telling a story of their pain that feels like you're peering into their soul. Okay, so this isn't a typical first call deck. This isn't about you or your company or your logos or your funding, nothing like that. It is purely about pain. And there's usually two formats to do this successfully. One is your company's pain story, which is what I'm going to use right here. And the other is telling a customer story and their painful situation in a way that resonates with your buyer, right? So the formula is you do one of two of those things for the first few minutes of your call. Ideally, it resonates deeply with the person you're talking with. And then you shut up and say, anyway, enough about our company and our customers. Help me understand your biggest challenges when it comes to XYZ area. And again, if you've told a story that feels like you really understand them and they see themselves in the story that you're telling, now you've earned the right to ask questions, and they're going to want to tell you everything because they know you understand them. So I'll give you a very simple example of how I do this when I'm selling our interviews as a service platform. It's not complicated. It's probably a 3-minute pitch, and I'll show you how to make the transition, and then we'll go from there. So let's pretend, I've gotten through the upfront contract. We've done our small talk and we're starting to get into the meat of the discovery session. I'll set an upfront contract with something like, so you probably don't know that much about us. I would love to spend the first 5 minutes telling you a story of the problems that we solve to see if it resonates. Assuming it does, then I would love to hear what's going on in your world. I've got a few questions for you if that's okay. And then we'll go from there. At the end of the call, we'll decide whether or not next steps make sense to even discuss. But let me tell you a little bit about the problems that we solve here. So these stats are why we started this company, right? Sales hiring has a 40% mishire rate, meaning when you hire a B2B seller, 40% of them don't make it to month 12. We call that early tenure attrition. Okay, and they don't make it for, it could be performance reasons, they were managed out, or they just leave for a different job. But 40% mishire rate is a really high rate, especially when you as the CRO probably have modeled 25 to 30% in your annual plan. I'm curious what you've modeled, and I'll get them talking about this. Already I'm starting to resonate a little bit with them. And now I'll go over to the second stat. I'll say, now, the cost of one of those mishires is really, really expensive, especially when you have aggressive headcount targets. Because if you hire somebody, they don't work out and they attrit within 3 months or so, well, now you have to go backfill them. So you've got an open territory not generating ARR or revenue for your business when your annual model assumes that they would be. Now you've got to go backfill them, which is going to take some time. Could be a month or two. at the most. And then once you've backfilled them, you've got to ramp this new rep up to productivity, which depending, on your sales cycle could take anywhere from 4 to 6 months. So one attrition, earlier tenure attrition, is devastating. And the average is 40%. And I'll usually pause here. I'm curious to what extent this resonates so far. And they'll probably, if I'm talking to my ideal customer profile, they'll probably nod their heads and say yes, and I'll ask some additional discovery questions. And now I'll transition into this. Now I want to make a point with this slide. This deck is very targeted toward our ideal customer profile, which is like Series C and above companies, maybe Series B, that are growing headcount aggressively. If I'm not talking to that ideal customer profile, this won't resonate. If I am, then it will. So now I'll transition to saying something like this. Now, those stats I just shared with you actually get worse when you find yourself in a situation where you're hiring sales headcount aggressively, right? If you're hiring 2, 3, 5 AEs per month, now you find yourself in this situation where you've got to, make this sacrifice. You have a dilemma. Do you maintain your high bar of talent, but miss your hiring goals because maintaining your high bar of talent requires you to hire slow and rigorously? Or do you sacrifice your high bar for talent so that you can hit your hiring goals, right? Because you're hiring so fast that you've got to move fast and you've got to sacrifice it. And now basically the question is, which check do you want to cut? Right? Do you want to cut the check of missing your revenue targets because you missed your hiring targets, but you only brought in A players and coachable B players? Or do you want to cut the check of mishiring and early tenure attrition? Yeah, you hit your hiring goals, but you attrited 40 to 50% of your people, which has a huge ARR impact. Right now, if I'm talking to a VP of sales at a fast growing company, their stomach is starting to churn a little bit. And so now I'll transition to my last slide, and I'll say, when you find yourself in that situation, it devastates your annual model as a VP of sales or as a chief revenue officer, right? You're either going to be behind on headcount targets or you're going to mishire and have early tenure attrition. We've talked about, the ARR impact that comes with that. Your ramp time is probably going to be slower in this situation because your managers are spending a third of their time on hiring and neglecting their people, ramping their existing hires. Because of that, you're probably only going to have 50 to 55% of your reps meeting or exceeding quota because, again, your managers are spending all day in interviews. And finally, managers are busy. Their calendars are a huge bottleneck. And your time to hire can suffer pretty greatly just because getting the next step scheduled can take days, in some cases like a week or more, and you lose, great candidates to your competitors. And so now this is the end of the discovery prompter. At this point, I'll say, anyway, enough about our company and the problems we solve. Maybe I'll tell a customer story, not about the product or the results, but about the pain. I'll say enough about our company, enough about our customers. Help me understand your greatest challenges when it comes to sales hiring and headcount. And if I'm talking to my ideal customer profile, and if I have a story that resonates, and this one does when it comes to our ideal customer profile, they're going to tell me everything. I've had customers go on 10-minute monologues telling me everything I would need to make a compelling business case. Now, I'm going to give you one more tip on this one, and then we'll close out. You have to be careful about anchoring your deal to the wrong pain when you use a discovery prompter, right? If you'll notice something, I told a story about pain when it comes to sales hiring, and then I asked a question about their biggest challenges when it comes to sales hiring. And they probably have challenges, and they're going to go on and on about that. But the risk, if you listened to the Discovery Masterclass, is I might anchor to a painful problem in sales hiring that's not high enough on the priority list because I asked about sales hiring. So what I'm going to do about halfway through our discovery conversation, as I'm getting some details and it feels like the right moment, is I'm going to validate the business pain like we talk about in, I think it's the first or second class. And I'm going to say something like, all right, so here's what I've heard so far. and I'm going to summarize their problem. I'm going to say, I want to make sure we're talking about an issue that is high enough on your priority list to get attention and to anchor to. So like, is this the thing we should be talking about? When you think about your priority slide, not just hiring, but everything, is this something that occupies mind share for you? And should we keep moving forward? Or is this pretty low on your list? And maybe we should be talking about something else. So go give that a try. I realize coming up with your own discovery prompter is really, really hard to do. Try to leverage product marketing, sales enablement to help you. Try coming up with your own if your company will let you. At the very least, though, you can tell a customer story that resonates as long as you tell it from the pain perspective, not the here's what they achieved perspective. So go give that a try. I hope this helps. I'll attach the deck here too, just so you have the framework. And yeah, hopefully that was helpful. Enjoy the bonus.